Hi, Henk Akkermans, Supply Network Dynamics Chapter 12, clip number 7, Supplier Trust. In services, you're always co-producing, so it's not just the buyer who has to trust the supplier, it's also the supplier who has to trust the buyer. For instance, because when the supplier trusts the buyer, the supplier will be more willing to invest in the supplier. And that effect of willingness is a certain nonlinear effect. And here you see that if you're very willing to invest in the supplier as a function of your trust, then, well, you will invest more. So those are the consequences of trust. If you look at the incidences of trust, the supplier looks at the perceived openness of in this model with a weight of 50% openness of the buyer, and also a certain perceived effect of performance by the supplier, as perceived by the supplier, where performance here means do they actually spend the money they told they would. So you get two kinds of trust, a trust level in line with transparency and with buyer performance. And to see how those are generated, then we have to move to this one, the perceived performance and openness of the supplier. Sorry. This one here. So there is the way that the supplier, that the buyer looks at this. There is a certain amount of transparency, but there are certain that the supplier that the buyer has, and to a large extent that's also driven by a collaborative KPI regime. If they are under that regime, they will be very transparent. Else, it's driven by trust. For the supplier looks at how much the buyer forecasted, expected that the revenues will be for the supplier, and how much they actually are making. And so that leads to a certain perceived forecast accuracy. When that accuracy is low, just as we had in the in chapter 10, I think, on trivial transparency and trust, then the supplier will conclude that it is not a trustworthy performance. So here you've got that trust level in line with buyer performance. Here you've got trust level in line with transparency, the two drivers for the trust of the supplier in the buyer. And here you see that this transparency is automatically put to the max as soon as the collaborative KPI regime becomes active. So that's trust in the buyer from the viewpoint of